apologies from Alejo. He is unable to make it tonight, so Rod and I will be running it. I'm trying to turn off the security for the waiting room, but I can't, so I'll just have to keep an eye on that. And I'm just going to make Rod co-host, and we'll be ready to start in a second. Okay. Rod, are you happy to introduce the session tonight?
Yep. Okay. Yes. So, it's about the astrology, right? And every time we will have two of our, speaker, and come here to share different topic. Last time I remember, we did talk about a few different topics like Pluto, Jupiter, Pluto semi-square. Me and Chris was talking about it. And today we have a very interesting topic. To be honest, I don't know. I even don't know how to start with it because we are going to talk about something very, very different. Alejo has this idea, and I really enjoy it. It's about different hemisphere. To be honest, I have to say Alejo should be also another person be here to talk about because he only mentioned about I'm from Asia, I'm from the East. So we have a different view to see the sky. We have a different cosmology. And Wendy's from the South Hemisphere, from New Zealand, you never tell. And so we'll have a different view to see it. Especially, I was really, really impressed about the Maori cultures, stargazing and astrology. To be honest, I think Alejo is also from South Hemisphere, and that is also very, very different view. So today we will going to bring the different hemisphere and how we see the things, how we see the astrology in different way. I think this topic can break into two parts. It's like how the Western astrology appear in our hemisphere, in South Hemisphere, in East Hemisphere, and also how our own original view of cosmology and how our original view of the astronomy form the astrology there. So it would be very interesting to discuss these two different areas. What do you think, Wendy?
Well, yeah, because it has been debated quite a bit over the years, and I see Carol's in here. Carol got the link. Hi, Carol. And I just want to say, because I know that, Carol, you were around when Claire Martin did a lot of work on this. She, I don't think she put it to print, but there's some good work that she's done in the past, and there's been a few discussions over the years. And of course, we know that the astrology, tropical astrology that we practice, is
Mm-hmm.
sort of appears to be very sort of northern hemispheric. It's sort of centric. So it's so as it's based on the seasons. Um,
Yeah.
and I just want to firstly say I know that some people have discussed that we should flip the signs
Uh-huh.
in the southern hemisphere, which I'm certainly not a fan of. For many reasons, because we base the tropical zodiac. Well, it's shifted, of course, from the sidereal, unless you're a sidereal astrologer, and then you've probably got it right, or a Vedic. But also, this, for example, the sun is still in Aries.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that it's in Libra in the southern hemisphere. And even though the seasons are different, there's still other qualities that you can attribute to those signs. Seasons are one of them, and the interpretation we do attribute is our social construct that we put, that we layer our interpretation of. And the last reason I don't believe it is because, and I don't subscribe to it, is because I'm a Leo. Sorry,
Oh
Rod.
dear.
Rod's an Aquarian, so he may feel differently. No, I'm kidding.
No, I don't know, to be honest,
I don't know how you
because
feel about that.
it is very interesting, to be honest. What should I say? In one way, where I'm from, the basically we have like all around the world, we have a strong impact of a Western culture, and also so-called Western tradition. If we look from the maybe I would say the astrology in a maybe say Persian time, they are already slowly moving into China through the Buddhism. There is a lot of Buddhism texts are already blend in those 12 sign and astrology in the Buddhism's text and from Tibet and moving into China around so maybe 9th century or 8th century. So we are kind of used to it. So that kind of I mean for South Hemisphere there is a season flip, and that is very different. That is very different. But from east to west, it's just about how are we going to adopt this type of cosmology or not? Yeah, so it's like I mean, maybe for South Hemisphere there is a more shocking. There's more differences. I don't know because I'm not from South Hemisphere.
I think there's, coming back to, because the question, Alejo did give us some questions that we're going to ask and answer,
Okay.
attempt to ask and answer. But the one I think, yeah, where we assume that we could flip them. I mean, that I just feel that
Yeah.
I really do not. If you're going to do that, you're going to be doing it around the whole globe, and it just doesn't sit right with me with
Yeah.
certain because yeah, it just doesn't actually make logical sense.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I mean, I think it's important, and I'd like to talk tonight about how in New Zealand we use astrology.
Yeah.
And I don't, like Taiwan, you're saying that there's a lot of Buddhist um what arise. I mean, it's interesting because a colleague of mine is translating Buddhist texts,
Yeah.
and she's part of a 100-year program. And
Oh,
there are hundreds of them. It's going to take that long. So it's, I guess, when we have things like that being translated over time, we are going to have different interpretations. But I think that it's different from one country to another. It's a bit like different approaches. We
mm,
practice many different astrologies in many different areas. And I mean, you could sort of argue as well, if you're going to be very fixed on the zodiac signs,
mhm.
then you can even argue that they're really not 30 degrees either. There's a lot of astronomical rationale that could uh, challenge what we think, of course.
Mm.
I mean, if you're Vedic or sidereal, then that isn't an issue. But I
Yes.
mean, I don't know. I'm happy to. I can run through um, some of the more cultural aspects of astrology in New Zealand, because it's a really, really big deal for us. I mean, we are, by tradition, we are navigators by the
Mm.
sky. I mean, that is what we
Yes.
are. We are seafaring, sky watching navigators. And so, what in New Zealand we have what is called matariki, which I know, Rod, you're familiar with as well.
Big fan.
Um, yeah, right, cool, yeah. So this is, I mean, this image is from that I took in Tenerife, from Stellarium. This is the what we call matariki, which is basically the Pleiades. If you can see here, this is Matariki here, the Pleiades, which of course is in other parts of the world known as Seven Sisters, Makalila, Messiah, Subaru. But what is very important to us in New Zealand is that Matariki, which many of you will know as a Pleiades, actually, when it is, it heliacal rises between May and early July every year. And this is a really big deal for us because this is the start of our new year. And what, yeah, so here we have here. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but what has transpired is that Jacinda Ardern a few years back made it a public holiday. And now when you go anywhere in New Zealand, when like in 2023, that's when it became a public holiday. So it's only been 2 years, but all the parks are lit up. All the parks in New Zealand, it's a celebration of Matariki. And what Matariki actually is for us is it embeds absolutely every aspect of our culture. It is our time in terms of time. It will tell us about what season, where we're at. It dictates our timekeeping. We measure the lunar calendar from that point going forward for the next year. And every star within the Matariki has its own story, its own mythology. When it, I'm just sorry, losing myself here. Yeah, it was Matariki that helped with us in terms of celestial navigation when we traveled through the Pacific Ocean. But what I also wanted to say is, I'm just seeing which, yeah, really, it's has a massive social significance. So when Matariki is heliacal rising, then basically it tells us we need to say goodbye to those who have passed. It tells us exactly when we have to grow things and harvest things. And everything is pretty much dictated from that point in time. I'm just thinking if there's any other, yeah, these are the 9 stars of Matariki. One represents a deceased, one represents the trees, birds, and berries, one represents all that grows in the earth, one represents the winds, one represents growth and abundance, one represents good health, one represents rain of all types, and one represents the water, such as rivers and lakes, and all the creatures and life that live within them. And then another represents the oceans and all the creatures and life that live within them. So all these stars, they're all honored during this period. And it is a period of mourning as well. We put lanterns on the tree and things like that. And then when Matariki, when it is not seen, but then comes back after a month, after the next year, when it rises, we see those as the deceased as stars in the sky. So I just wanted to share that in terms of how in New Zealand we look at the astrology of how we arrived, how we lived, and how we continue to live. I mean, we are, again, as Rod said, influenced by Western tradition. We are, you know, in post-colonial times. So there is that influence. But I actually was in New Zealand last year when Matariki was celebrated, and I was in awe of how everyone in the country, everyone in the parks, and they're there till like 10 at night, and they're just there to celebrate that. It's a very amazing union of people, actually. So that's me for
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
Any,
Wow. Thank you, Wendy. And as you know, I'm a big fan about the Mataliki and how Maoris, using the stars is not only navigation. I think navigation is a really important bit of the Maori culture with the using stars. And also when I listen how those astrologers talking about how they measure the star to make prediction or forecasting of the year's harvest.
Mm,
And say on the day of the Mataliki, on the sun before when Mataliki rising before the sun, they do the observation and then to see the brightness of
mm,
the seven stars, which one's bigger, which one is more bright, or which one is wobbling, and which one is what, and to describe, are we going to have a more rain? Are we going to have a more winds? Because you
yes.
describe the wind star, start with wind, start with rain, start with things. And I would say that sounds very familiar.
Mm,
Because I think if we know how the origin of the Western tradition astrology, but how the Babylonian astrologer, they read the stars. They are not reading. Yeah, one part of it is the planet with ecliptic movement. They say that's negotiate with God. They negotiate with God. They see the movement of Venus, they see the movement of Mars, and then they're moving. What does that mean? But they don't really just using eclipse bell. They really also using all the other part of stars. They read the brightness of the stars. They read, is there a nova appear in the stars? And when I first, because I was really, really fascinating about the study of a fixed stars, like a reason we all talk about algo now. I wondering, is that a beginning of the everyone going to draw attention of fixed stars, or they just stick with algo? That's no problem. I think more attention we give to it, we give them more power. But one interesting things about the how the ancient Chinese astrologer, even before the Western astrology come into China with the Buddhism, we have our own view of the sky. I will introduce you later. We have our own view of the sky, and we have our own so-called astrology. And it's like how Maori to make forecasting or prediction of the sky. They they just examine all the stars, which star is wobbling, or which star sounds looks like a little bit diminished, or what stars has suddenly have a brightness coming up, or suddenly where has a star appear? They call it a guest stars. Those stars suddenly appear in the sky like a nova. Nova is a word. Nova in the Chinese view is a guest stars. So they are the guest. They don't last long. They are there. And small tiny comets. Comet has a different name. Comet, either if comet is super bright and super large, they either call comet because it's called broom stars, or they either call maybe monster stars. But if they are smaller, too small, they are another guest star. So that was very interesting, the ancient Chinese culture of astrology using the whole skies. But we still have also coordinate system. This is what I'm going to share with you today. And I did give a talk in the faculty summer school several years ago, evening talk about how Chinese to see the stars. So, and here I'm just like share a little tiny bit. I'm not going to bombard you with everything about the Chinese astronomy, but just a basic idea of the Chinese, how Chinese see the stars. So could we see here? Could you see the PowerPoint I share?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this is very interesting. This is the star map, and I think is around maybe um after probably around the 11th centuries, made original from the 11th centuries. And you can see, you still, today, you can see this one is a crack, is in Suzhou, a city near Shanghai. So if you ever have a chance to dare to visit Shanghai, and then you go to Suzhou, 1 hour's car journey, a very, very beautiful garden. And that you can see this star map on the wall. And so that tell you, we see the star, and the center of this star map is North Pole. The center of this star map is North Pole. So the North Pole is the center of the sky, is like the capital. It's like capital. So they think it's like a Beijing, in China. So that's capital. That's the royal palace. And then all the other things evolve and moving around this royal palace. There's markets, there is maybe even the bar, there's a hotel, there's a sky river, and there's also position for astrologer. I will tell you what is astrologer's stars. And that would be the temple, and also if you have temple, you need to have a ceremony and sacrifice. For sacrifice, you need a cow, herds, and you need a lamb. So it's all evolved in this kind of imperial administration way. Have a whole sky. So we have a market, but you can see two circles. The two circles is, one of them is the ecliptic. And another one, I bet, is this one, is the celestial equator. Celestial equator. So we, Chinese ancient astrologer, using 28 of a mention. Well, there is a debate, because I know most people say, oh, I know the 27 in the Vedic astrology. And then, well, to be honest, as my understanding, they are very different. As my understanding, to be honest, they are very different. It's not about nationalism or something, but when their position in the sky are very, very different. 28 mention and 27 mention of the nakshatra are slightly different. I don't know, are they share same origin or not? I don't know. Probably yes. But even they share the same origin, nowadays they have kind of evolved in a very different way. So this is the next map, and it was like when they called me, say, "Where are you?" I was making this map. Sorry, because I want a beautiful, interesting image to show you. So I think some people heard about the feng shui, Chinese feng shui, right? And then if you know about something about Chinese feng shui, there is a principle. There is a principle. The left side is the dragon side. The right side is the tiger side. And the left side is a good side. Right side is a bad side. That's because the left side is a dragon. That means if you are in the springtime of an evening, you stand outdoor facing south, then you will see all the constellation belong to dragon. Dragon is here. Belong to dragon is coming up from your left-hand side. So that's a view of describe feng shui. To be honest, the basic idea is from astrology, but developed in the how you manage the geographic area. So the left-hand side is good because the dragon, from the Virgo to Libra to Scorpio to Sagittarius, are the dragon constellation in Chinese view. In the springtime, in the evening, they rising from the left-hand side. At the same time, opposite side, the tiger, Aries, Taurus, in the evening time, they are sinking to the west horizon. So tiger and the dragon, one is left, one is right, and one is alive. The dragon is alive because rising in the springtime. And the tiger rising in the autumn. So that's it is about everything, diminished, and the leaf fall, and everything gone. We're getting cold weather. So that's why basic Chinese idea about the dragon is good on the left-hand side. Place all your money on the left-hand side. That's basic feng shui idea. It's related to astrology about about 28 mention and group into 4 animals. So dragon is the one of the 4 appear in the evening of a springtime from Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, and then followed by tortoise. Tortoise would be the area from end of a Sagittarius to Capricorn to Aquarius, and also part of a Pegasus would be no, Pegasus is not. Yeah, Pegasus is end. Pegasus is the end of a tortoise, and then we move to tiger. For tiger, you will have Pisces and Andromeda and Aries, Taurus, Orion. The Orion, we describe Orion as a tiger's head. We describe Orion as a tiger's head. And that's quite interesting. And so that's kind of, especially when we see the whole constellation of Orion, usually is a little bit about something going to bite you, or something going to starting the war or something. So that's very interesting. However, you can see, because from here, the 28 mention move to the celestial equator now. So it's a move further south. We have from Orion move to Hydra. So big part of the bird, or we call it red birds, a 7 mention of a red birds belong to Hydra. And then, to be honest, you can say they include Cancer, Gemini, Leo, Virgo. But the big part of mention is located at Hydra constellation. Hydra is a really, really large constellation. And then come back to Virgo. So this is our year-round 28 mention of Chinese view. As I just mentioned, we are designed everything like a royal palace. So the around the North Pole is like purple forbidden city. And underneath you have the Supreme Palace. Here is administration. Here is administration area. Then you will have a part is market. Everyone running their business there. So it's kind of using the life, or also using the so-called metropolitan life view to measure the star map. And there is a stars called Ho, which is mean, I think it's a market, or what should I say? It's kind of a nobleman's name, but that is a role of the astrologer in that market. Well, today, if I tell you the name is the stars in the Ophiuchus called Ras Ahagay, or Ras Ahagay, is in Ophiuchus. The head of Ophiuchus in Chinese view, that's the stars of astrologer in the sky, and they're locating in the sky market. So this is kind of a brief idea about how, this kind of a different view to measure the sky, and we give a different interpretation. However, this way, there's 2 things I have to tell you. This kind of method and doctrine did not pass on. Very sad, because there was, there was in the royal court, and in 1911, when the kind of Qing dynasty finished and a new China coming up, the astrologer didn't have a chance to pass this on. So they die with them. This kind of a culture die with them. This kind of skill, how to read sky, die with them. The art die with them. But fortunately, that's one thing I'm really happy with is around the 2000 years record, 2000 years Chinese court record. They record every single observation with prediction. So in every Chinese history book, doesn't matter any dynasty, they have a part of a record is astronomy or astrology record waiting for us or Chinese astrologer to translate it, to read it. And that's why, how do I discover that? Because I'm into fixed stars. And then, but I have to, before I learn Western fixed stars, I just have a problem because I have to learn their name. If I learn their name, I will ask myself, what's their Chinese name? And I find out their Chinese name are so different, totally different. So I say, what does that mean? What does it mean horn? Why Spica's name is horn? Where is the horn? Whose horn? Dragon's horn is Spica. And then, yeah, Spica and Arcturus are dragon's horn. Arcturus is a big horn, Spica is a small horn. So that's interesting. I say, okay, I start to learn back to my culture. And I learn how they read the sky. And I just feel fascinating. Even I'm really love Western astrology, but I still try to understand. I don't want to say I'm expert. I'm not expert, but I try to spend time to understand how they read the stars and what does those name. How does that mean? And then from time to time, I will read it because thank God I was study history before. I was study history before, and I have to read all those history books, honestly. And then so I'm used their language. So when I read those star name and with how they describe it, that was very fast, very quick. I don't need a translator. It's like how you read the Shakespeare's English. There is you probably understand 70% or 50%, but I still have a lot of things that, what does that mean? Like that. So it is quite interesting. I just and then I understand at least Chinese culture in the imperial court, they read astrology in a very different way. But nevertheless, the Western astrology did come into China in 10th century and was really rooted in the market or in the general public. There are few interesting poet or book. They did describe, they complain why I'm not Capricorn or why I am Capricorn. And that was so funny when you read they complain about why I am Capricorn with a famous famous writer, famous poet. And you just like, ow, today that would be a Taylor Swift song. And it's a very interesting. So we have a different way to see it. And more of this is like India, Hindu culture, that astrology was so important in Chinese society. We know how to count the lunar date, everyone. So everyone's birthday registered in two ways. Like my birthday, I was born in 13th February, but I always remember my lunar day is the first lunar month, 11 days of the first lunar month. So I know that, 11 day after new moon, I was born in 11 day after new moon. So when I teach astrology, when I teach my student astrology, when I teach the lunar phase or something, it was so easy because they all grip it so quickly. And also, yeah.
So I was going to say, I think it's also important. I think every single country has their roots in, has every culture has astronomical and or astrological history, and traditions. And I want to ask Melanie in a minute too, because she's from South Africa, of
Yeah.
course. So
Yeah.
but you know, Australia. I remember visiting an art gallery in Melbourne many years ago, and this guy telling the story of how Australian Aborigines, and please, if anyone is here from Australia and knows more than me, please feel free to speak up, because I'm not Australian. But there was a lecture by this Aboriginal guy who talked about, well, first of all, it's important to note that Aboriginals are not tribal people. You know, they are hunters and gatherers, so they move around in small groups, you know, so anything from 20 to 100, but they're not tribal. So um, uh, and what is fascinating is the continuation of a lot of paintings and artwork in uh, you know, in Aboriginal environments. Like, and there has been a lot of historical paintings in caves in Australia, things like all the moons of Jupiter that you can't see without a telescope, and they've been there for, you know,
Wow.
but yeah, and I mean, I think every culture is really enriched with their own um, astrology, you know, their own interpretation. But I also think it's really interesting that there's often similarities as well. Like, I mean, our creation myth in Māori, like our creation myth is, you know, Rangatane, the Sky Father, and you know, anymore the Earth Mother being uh, you know, the Sky Father and Earth Mother, and their children who overturned their mother and split up their parents. The
Yeah.
father, you know, went up to the sky and cried and created rain and things like that, which is almost identical to Greek. It's almost identical, and even some words and things like that. So I think it's, you know, interesting. And I mean, he must have some lovely, um, you know, you must have great viewing in Taiwan as well. I mean, Rod is an expert in this. He makes the most beautiful imagery. If no one's seen it, do go on to Rod's website, because he does his images and his astronomy viewing and photos are incredible. And his time that, you know, I don't know what to call videos and things like that. They are great. But can I ask Melanie? Melanie, I see you're in here. Hi, Melanie. I mean, you're from South Africa. So what is you're a southern hemispheric like us, well, like me. What do you think?
Right. I am very interested in this, but like what you already mentioned, Wendy, I don't subscribe to the notion of switching them around from north to south and, you know, deducting or adding, whichever way it goes, the 12 hours, you know, that never quite
Yeah.
made sense to me. And I guess, well, if this ever comes up in a class, my sort of get out clause, in other words, something that doesn't exactly close the question, but it lets me off the hook in terms of things that are more technical. So I just say, well, for me, astrology is like a language of the soul. And the soul is the part of us that actually lives. It may be impacted by, but ultimately it lives beyond culture and history and all that kind of thing to something much more essential. And certainly in my experience, astrology really does speak to that mysterious essence, which is the core of all of us, wherever we come from. And certainly that's been borne out in my practice, because I have worked, well, with so many people from so many different nations and cultures and even religions, you know. And the thing is, our language, it still works, because my sense is that whatever the cultural and historical symbols are that have grown up to be the vehicle for astrology, and however much they are similar or different between the nations, I think, you know, particularly in the context of like a live consultation or a live class, there's something behind all of that which comes up and comes through it. So that's my kind of get out clause. But that's no, but I really do see that and believe it. But I do have what I think is a lovely story just about my own relationship with the sky. So I was actually born in Zimbabwe, not South Africa.
Sorry, Melanie.
Oh, no problem. It's like being called a New Zealander when you're an Australian or vice versa kind of thing. But I learned some about the constellations from my father, who was a man very connected with the natural world in all sorts of ways. And I have vivid memories of, every evening just lying flat on my back on the lawn, just gazing at the sky. And my father would point out certain things and so forth. And the thing that always stayed with me and that I longed to see, and that was like imprinted in my mind, was the Southern Cross. So, of course, that's a constellation that's visible pretty much all over the Southern Hemisphere. But although I believe it used to be visible, in southern parts of Europe with precession and other kind of weirdness that the solar system does, it's basically barely visible at all in anywhere above the equator. But I love this cross pattern in the sky so much. And even today, if I travel again to the Southern Hemisphere, the thrill that I feel when I see that constellation. Now, during the 1980s, I was studying Chiron a lot, okay? And I still can't believe this, but it's true. I'd already finished the whole book and it was published. And I then learned that the Southern Cross is directly underneath the constellation of Centaurus, which is absolutely massive. And anywhere that you see the Southern Cross, it's literally under the belly of the Centaur, which is a huge constellation, which really dominates really the whole southern sky. And so from that point of view, I spent hours and hours during my childhood lying on my back, staring at Centaurus without knowing what I was looking at. That constellation is said to be the one in which Chiron was immortalized when he finally died. And it was actually
how interesting. That's
it was actually
personal
Brian,
to you. How personal.
very much so. And it was Brian
Wow.
Clark who pointed that out to me. And I almost fell over. I thought, how could I not have seen that? But I didn't.
Wow.
So
How
I
cool.
do know, in terms of the indigenous cultures, at least in the southern Africa, around Zimbabwe kind of area, I do know that those cultures regarded their star law as the most closely guarded secret of all in terms of their cultures. And of course, those cultures transmitted their knowledge orally. So they weren't a culture that wrote stuff down and put it in books and which went into libraries and all that.
Well, we didn't all have we all had, lots of us had oral,
Yeah, exactly. But worse than that, during the times, during historical times in Rhodesia, as it was actually against the law to publish anything that might suggest that the indigenous African people had any brains or sophistication. It was unbelievable. It was against the law. And so there was no literature anyway, even about all of that. Then once independence came, the first thing I did when I went back was I went round all the local bookshops, hoovering up everything and anything I could find that was published post-independence. I never found anything on the star law. And, talking to the people, I understood that that was their most closely guarded secret. and really only available to initiates. It was not common knowledge even amongst the people themselves. But at the very famous Zimbabwe ruins, the ancient city of Zimbabwe, after which the country takes its name, there's a big carved round plate with symbols around the edge that looks very much like a zodiac plate. I've still not been able to decipher the symbols myself. I mean, I can see what animals they're referring to in most cases with the symbols, but I don't have any of the cosmological background to really understand more about the meaning. And that might have to remain one task not
Well,
done.
maybe someone from there can,
I was just going to say, but I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody who's working in South Africa now or Zimbabwe, that they might have been able to research that deeply in whatever way.
Yeah. Is there anyone here that can add to Melanie's story? Anyone who wants to say anything about?
Just one more thing. The dominant tribe in Zimbabwe are the Shona people. And amongst their oral lore is the belief that they came down from the north of Africa, basically Egypt. And if you look at some of the statuary, it's not difficult to see a kind of a familiarity in terms of Egyptian imagery and so forth. And when I first saw this big carved plate, I immediately thought about the famous zodiac at Dendera in Egypt. So, I mean, I'm just wildly making connections here. I don't have any references or anything for that, but that's how it felt to me, because the language is quite different.
Yeah.
The whole structure of people's faces and even the color of their skin is very different.
We're running out of time, Melanie. Sorry, we've only got just over 10 minutes left. So maybe is there anyone? Thank you for that. But is there anyone else who wants to talk about the about the tropical zodiac in the southern hemisphere, all the theories that have been?
Yeah, that would be interesting. Also, I'm not from South Hemisphere, but I heard about the ones. I think Julia Sima, who is running the CIA Cosmic Intelligence Agency, quite interesting. She says no, she also not flip the sign, but she does feel because the change of a season, so the temperament are different, and that's it. I think that is quite interesting. That's what I learned from her. Her view of how South Hemisphere, how South Hemisphere, doing the different way.
Yeah, and I often think when the I mean I've had to birth lambs before, and I've had to physically have my hands and birthing a lamb, and there is nothing more eerie than in the smell of the grass and the dew and the sounds and the environment. It's a very, very eerie experience. But of course, for us in New Zealand, it's Libra. And I mean, rather than conversation on shadows, I think the polarities, may come into it. But I don't think there's this, the sun is definitely not in Aries when that's happening in the southern hemisphere. And if you did flip them, you would have to actually flip it at every sort of latitude around the planet, as you would, know. So, if you were only sort of, if you were in Taiwan, you wouldn't, which is not, it's just above the, what's the latitude? I don't know,
25.
You're not going to shift that.
No, not much.
Yeah, and what about planets on the equator that don't have the seasons? That these seasons are a social. I know that that our interpretation of it is very northern hemisphere centric, and yet on the equator, you don't have those seasons at all.
Yeah, Wendy,
Roy,
Wendy, can I put a point in here?
Yeah, sure.
It follows on from what you were saying, actually, because when I first arrived in New Zealand, I lived there for about 4 or 5 years, with Carolyn, and that people constantly asking, well, does it work in the southern hemisphere, this northern hemisphere stuff? And I said, well, look at what you said. Look at the seasons. The Leo is in winter, and everybody goes on holiday during Aquarius. How does that affect the New Zealand character? And I think that's really important. But there's another factor that is not quite the same, but is to do with my travels, where I traveled a lot from England down to the equator virtually, or over the equator, and then back up again north, about 3 or 4 times as we traveled from England to New Zealand. And what I noticed was there were certain bands of character that seemed to be latitudinally based. So that, you know, if you look at the sort of disposition of people in, say, Turkey, going across to Iran and to India, but northern India, you get a slightly different characterization as you get nearer to the equator. And as you go further north, the Nordic people tend to be rather more different in their disposition. And it doesn't matter about the religion. It's something to do, maybe I always felt, with the angle, if you take Placidus and stuff like that. So there are 2 factors here. There's if it's a different sign, south and north, which I think the signs work still in the south, but they have a different way of expressing themselves because of the climate. And also the angle of how far you are above and north of the equator as it affects your disposition. I mean, people are much more spirited in northern India than they are in southern India. And it's the same issue in Turkey than if you go down to Egypt and then further south in Sudan, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Roy. Does anyone want to make a very quick comment or question? Diana said she's curious who started the focus on the seasons. Thank you, Carol. Ptolemy, or at least how Ptolemy was interpreted. Thank you. Isn't it? Yeah. Carol, do you remember Claire? Because I remember having a conversation with Claire one night for hours on the southern, and she had done a lot of research, and I just wondered, because you were there too.
No, I don't, I'm afraid. Do you remember specifically what the conversation was about?
No, I can't remember. She had some really interesting research on you know, and she did not subscribe to flipping either, but she just had a really different view, and I think it was really I know I should have I have looked out for things that she's but she didn't. I don't believe it's put in print. It may be, but or maybe she, you know, shouldn't continue with that.
I got a quick question, Wendy, maybe.
Yes.
I'm thinking, you know, in my own sort of construct. It's Diana.
Sorry, hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I think of Leo, I think of the sun ruling Leo. I think of warmth. If I think of Capricorn, I think about Saturn, and I think of it being cool. And I'm thinking, am I getting my temperaments mixed up with my seasons? Is there some kind of influence from traditional astrology here with the temperaments that we are interpreting, you know, from the hot and the dry and those things? It's just come into my thoughts, that's all. Yeah,
perhaps. And also perhaps it was an argument, you know, as we again, you know, because sidereally, if you're a sidereal astrologer, you know, I mean, so I guess it was an argument for the tropical system, you know, as opposed to why didn't we become sidereal? Why is sidereal astrology is a Western system, but it's also an Eastern one as well. But you know, maybe it's just I don't know, a justification to that we're 23 and 24 degrees out or whatever.
With Diana's question, one thing I still remember, I'm not an expert in the traditional astrology, but I remember there's one year when I think Dorian Greenbaum was teaching in the calculation of temperament, and she was mentioned about the season with the sun sign. When you consider with all those, you know, temperament things, and you did added sun sign as the season rather than the element. So like sun sign in the spring, like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, they are the spring sign. So they calculate as the temperament of the hot and moisture. That's what I barely remember. So yes, maybe there is, the from the traditional view about the only sun sign, because they related to season, and they did consider about temperament of the sun sign season. Yeah, that is part of it. They take into account.
So maybe we're getting something from Greek astrology there, or those
Probably,
roots.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would make
yeah.
sense. Yeah, because it's like it's so
Yeah.
ingrained in my consciousness to think that way, that European way, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like, where'd
Yeah.
that come from, Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you.
But of course, even the seasons vary within the Northern Hemisphere,
Only, yes.
I mean, so they don't sort of universally apply either.
Especially now.
Well, yeah, I mean, where I come from the weather where I come from is pretty much like the north of Scotland. So, there really is only one season anyway. So, you don't, so yeah.
Well,
I
by
do.
saying, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, but people, generating different theories. But I think,
Yeah.
when you're looking at things like that, the maths needs to work and it needs to be somewhat, logical, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob.
I do remember though, when I was first learning about astrology, I was still living in Zimbabwe. And I spent a long time trying to do it inside out, meaning not trying to link the seasons with astrology and see how the seasons mirrored the meaning of the signs, but to turn it inside out and sort of ask myself, how does this time of year express the known qualities of whatever sign it was? And it worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I have the sun in Gemini, so Northern Hemisphere, that's early spring, and things are growing very fast and all the rest of it. But in Zimbabwe, that was the beginning of winter. And one feature of that time of year is the contrast in the temperatures. So it can still be blazing hot during the day, but you can have 5, 6, 7 degrees below zero of frost at night. And that would kill a lot of, vegetation and so on. And you'd see these really dead-looking trees with black leaves and a funny smell of decaying vegetation, looking really grim. And then still this brilliant sunshine and blue sky. So in other words, the contrast and the irreconcilable opposites and that kind of stuff. And then sign of Cancer is right into winter. So you best go into your shell because none of the houses have central heating, And you can go, I found a way of going right through the year like that and seeing the symbolic resonance very clearly, just reversing it, so to speak.
I agree. When Wendy mentioned about the video I sent to her a couple of years ago about a Maori astronomy professor talking
He's
about the
wonderful.
Madaliki. He is wonderful. I really always wondering one day could we have him in our conference?
I
that
know.
would be going to
I would love
going
to. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And then he's
He
talking
is cool.
about how I think the Antares is mean hot weather in Maori's culture. And that because when Antares appear as a winter, that's summer in New Zealand. That's a summer in New Zealand. But how do we, in North Hemisphere, that is Scorpio, that is the autumn. But how do we still associate these stars with hot and heat? That's why I say, when Melanie says things like that, I think, yes, we always trying to, I don't know why we share some common things and interesting to to associate with one particular stars, like Ceres. Babylonian call it Inanna's bow and arrow. And in China, I don't know, do they discuss that before? But in China, it's also a star of an arrow. And we know in the Egypt series, it also suggests that the river Nile run fast like an arrow. And so you're just like, why? Why this star series are in the three different culture are related to arrow?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are over time, guys. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been really fun, lots of interesting things, and
yeah.
Thank you all for contributing, and we will see you. Just a couple of things. Don't forget, there is a the last deal for the AA conference.
Yeah.
It is the last week that we are offering the last and final discount. So if you have not booked, and there's only a couple of places left for the residential, and I'm just going to post this in the chat box.
Yeah, Wendy and I visited early last week, last week, wasn't it? Yeah, and I saw it place for the first time. The quality of accommodation is excellent, and it's an interesting site. It's very interesting, circular sort of a place. I'd love to have 1,000 people there and do the whole zodiac there, but we're just exploring it at the moment. But do come along if you can, and if you can't, do go online. And tell your friends, it's going to be special. There's a lot of speakers and they're all very good.
Yeah, and we've got the next Astro Duets in a month's time as well. In the meantime, while I'm getting this up, do keep tuning into YouTube and Instagram for Rod, Christina, and my new moon update, which is always really fun. It's only 10 minutes. It's always good. And the next astrological duets, you do have the link. It's the same link every time, guys. So don't feel we send out a new one each time. Oh, is it on the website? Oh, no. I'll put it in the next one is 19th of September. Is that, or is there an August one?
No.
So that the 19th of September with Rod and Wade Caves discussing the year of elections. So yeah, tune in then. So in the Rod didn't know that. News to Rod. Thanks, Rod, and thanks everyone. Take care, everyone. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
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 Bye.